a PhD, a doctorate in social policy. She is assistant professor at Bethlehem University, is assistant professor in the Department of Social Science in Palestine, is vice president for the MENA regions of the Comité 34 of the International Sociological Association, where we have met in the last international conference. Her research interests focus on youth community development, collective action, youth engagement, with a special focus on the impact of context and institutions of the socialization of youth and building their resilience. Her current research is focused on youth groups building collective agency through the various initiatives conducted in Palestine, in which the research looks into how would life under colonization affect the forms of engagement of young people, and how do youth build their individual and collective resilience and agency. Previous research focused on the role of organization in the formation of types of young leaders and the Palestinian youth organization resiliency and strategies to face challenge on work under colonization. Lo que acabo de explicar lo hemos vivido en vivo y en directo con algunos miembros de nuestro equipo cuando Abeer organizó una conferencia sobre juventud y activismo en Belén hace unos años, a la que tuvimos ocasión de participar, y gracias a ella pudimos conocer diferentes agrupaciones y organizaciones juveniles. Su conferencia, la conferencia que ahora pronunciará, se titula Between Neoliberal Economic Policies and Colonization, Youth Dreams and Action During COVID. Entre políticas económicas neoliberales y la colonización, los sueños de la juventud y la acción durante el COVID. Quiero destacar que en estas terceras jornadas empezamos viajando a las antípodas, a Australia. Hoy acabamos de asistir a una sesión sobre las Américas, desde Argentina a Quebec, pasando por México, y creo que es muy oportuno acabar estas jornadas visitando el Medio Oriente, en concreto Palestina, un mundo sobre el que a menudo desconocemos casi todo, sobre todo cómo es la juventud y cómo la juventud de Medio Oriente y de Palestina está viviendo la pandemia. Abeer, so go away. We have 1 hour for your speech, including some questions at the end, and you can speak now.
Okay, thank you, Carlos, and thank you everyone for being there. And after a long 2 days of a conference that you had, I tried to attend some of the sessions, and it was interesting. I couldn't understand everything, but it was interesting for me to see all the energy that was present in these 2 days. I would like also to thank the organizers for inviting me and for allowing me to have this opportunity to be part of your event. And yeah, and I would love to have some similar. Actually, now I'm jealous after seeing your conference for 2 days. I'm jealous, and I'm thinking now we need to have something like this in our part of the world. So I would like to start with my paper. I would like to start thinking about to understand the impact of COVID-19 on young people in Palestine. We cannot look at it at this place without the understanding of the socio-political context in which the young people live, and how it leads to the expand of the marginalization of the young people at this time. I will try to link the current challenges, the developmental challenges that that emerged before the COVID-19 started, but then it also impacted highly what's going on in the current crisis that the society is facing. As you may know, the Palestinian society is a colonized society. We've been under colonization for the last 73 years. And this led to having a fragmented society in which we live under various authorities and in which we have checkpoints in various areas and different laws. Maybe sometimes you would hear about Gaza by itself, you would hear about the West Bank, the two authorities fighting each other and splitting the authority. And then, of course, there's the Israeli colonization that's in addition having different laws and control over the ground. So the Palestinian youth are facing, when we're talking about development or facing a crisis in a Palestinian context, we have to think about what's going on with the colonization. How does it interact with the policies implemented by the two Palestinian authorities, whether if it's in the West Bank or in Gaza, because they are in a way different, and when do they coordinate or conflict? And how would the other actors also impacting the various policies, mainly the economic policies, and how it's impacting the social development of the people? And with this, we talk about the neoliberal economy policy that's been implemented in Palestine, mainly since the year 2007. So this is how we can, this is what will give us a larger picture about what's going on with how the Palestinian young people are trying to face this crisis, how the society is facilitating it, and what challenges actually also or they are facing in as they live it. The Palestinian society was hit very hard with the COVID-19. And currently we're having a community spread of the virus. Still, and we can see that a lot of the marginalized groups were badly impacted. Before the COVID-19, we had, due to the neoliberal policies implemented in and the colonization, 1/3 of the population lacking any food security, and they were living on aid. Another third of the community was considered to be living on the edge, and now with such a shock, which is the pandemic, now this number massively increased of people in need of aid. So we're talking about high numbers of poverty, high numbers of people living on aid, and with high rates of unemployment taking place in the Palestinian society. Still, the Palestinian Authority is expected to function as a state and as a government and provide all the services needed for the Palestinian people. Yet, it wasn't able to provide these services, and a lot of people, the social security networks that the people have were highly weakened, and the health system faced a lot of challenges because they cannot actually meet all the needs emerging because of the COVID-19. Despite the fact that the Palestinian Authority tried a lot of measures to enhance the system and how it works. For example, just to give you what's going right now, we reached in Palestine like 2 months ago 1,000 cases a day. After 3 days of that, the Ministry of Health were unable to test for COVID-19 because they don't have the kits needed. And now when you look at the numbers, you know that it is only like 300, 400, but you know that they are fake numbers considering what you see in the community and knowing the capability of the Ministry of the Health and the system existing. In addition to the limitation of the health system, we can also, we noticed during the COVID-19, there was an increased centralization of household economy, which mainly depends on women labor and inside the household. This increased also the pressure on women and we're talking about young women in such cases inside the household. Still, the trend remains. A lot of NGOs tried in the first duration of the lockdown, the first 3 months, to also introduce or go back to local economy projects and going back to gardening and agriculture. Yet all these approaches were stopped after the lockdown was halted by its initial phase, and people had to go to, between brackets, their regular work, what remained from the regular jobs that they have. Still, we're having high unemployment, we're having a failure of the health system to a certain end, and with the various local economy. Still, we see a lot of initiatives, local community initiatives, mainly led by young people, to join and form committees, voluntary committees in the local community to provide support for the local communities. And this was a very strong intervention, and in which the young people were the first to start and mobilize on the local ground, but mainly in their local communities, but not on, you could see it on a national spread as a phenomenon, but it was mainly centralized in their local communities. These committees were stopped eventually because of when the lockdown was over, then people had to go back to their work. But if any village or town is under lockdown again, we can see that these committees are being reactivated again. When we're thinking about a new liberal economy and system, I'm looking at the time. How much time we still have? Carles? I can't hear you.
30-40 minutes.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay. Okay, because I felt that I went too much into details in here, so this is why. So when we're thinking about the new liberal economy, what happened in these policies that implemented by the Palestinian Authority and before the pandemic, mainly they worked on increasing the privatization and giving more power to to increase the privatization, cutting on the expenses that the government will spend. So with that, they limited the support for the marginalized group. They cut down on support provided for example, for services, for health, for education, for all of this level. This led for more exclusion for various groups. And with regard to youth development, we could see that most of the policies were focused on economic policies, mainly working on small, medium enterprises, which focused on working with young people to have like entrepreneurs work on developing their own project, to work on anything. And most of the time these projects used to be a copy paste from each other, like textile printing, working on for example, blouses, or for example, working on byproducts like soap making for young women in villages, or making food. So it wasn't something that is totally sustainable, and these projects faced a lot of challenges of accessing markets, resources, and the distribution. Taking this into consideration, we can see how, when the COVID-19 took place, how these projects actually found it so difficult to survive, unless the young people managed to utilize social media to market their products, and that meant that they would have to have products that are totally different, or market their products out of their local community. Okay, to understand also, to have a better idea of go back of also how we're perceiving youth during this crisis, and this is very essential to look at. There's two visions to look at the young people. There's one place where we're looking at the young people as the excluded, that they're the unemployed, that the quality of education is dropping, and we're looking at them in a total deficit model in which they're facing a lot of challenges. And there's another perspective that's looking at them as the protectors and the ones that will take the society out of this crisis. Our Palestinian Bureau of Statistics, in his statement on August 11th, which is the International Youth Day, they will state, the youth are the society's most live, vital, and productive segment, and they are expected to have an important and major role in the recovery from this crisis. With this statement, not only they're placing the burden on the young people, they're giving them the responsibility, it also ignores all the structural factors that will impact the recovery of the Palestinian economy and the Palestinian society from the COVID-19 crisis. These factors are such as like the colonization, in which is confiscating the land, in which is what type of power of grassroots we have on the ground, what type of organization, what mobilization structures we have, what are the social network support that exist in a community to allow for a community to recover, what type of solidarity exists in the community, and are we working on toward alternative development in which we can really depend on ourselves in our economy and development, or we're actually extending and depending on the colonialization. So such statement, we could see that they do not include these factors within a perspective. We expect the youth to take the role, but we're not. We're acting as if as if we are in a normal nation with no colonization, with no fragmentation of a nation between two governments, with nothing at all. And also within this statement, we're not looking at, for example, the patriarchy system in which actually marginalizes the young people and does not allow them to be part of the decision making in the various structures. So we're looking at this. So this is one of the aspects, one thing to think about. Also, to understand what's going, how the status of the young, what's going on within the facing of the crisis nationally, we noticed that the Palestinian Authority, the PA, when they started facing the COVID-19, they announced a request for support from mainly the private sector to provide the money to meet the needs of the marginalized group. With this, they actually limited their power to put any restrictions on the private sector to laying off the employees, to exploit the employees, and mainly the most marginalized and the most laid off because of their experience, and they are the young professionals, are the young people. So this is something it's important to look at to understand the ability of the Palestinian Authority to provide or introduce any development or improvement for the so I would like to look at the three aspects when I'm thinking about the young people. One of them is the education, what's happening to the quality of education, because we all know it's a very strong indicator when we're thinking about the development crisis. I want to look also on the employment and what's going on in that, and we started talking about it. The other aspect I would like to look at is the increase of the number of arrests, political arrest of the Palestinian young people by the Israelis. And then the fourth, I would look at what are the Palestinian young people doing to change in the situation they're living under. So I'm going to start with the aspect of education to discuss the. So on March 7th, this is where the first day where the first case of COVID-19 was discovered. The Ministry of Education and Higher Education shifted directly the education process from face-to-face into distance learning. This was done overnight with no preparation for the education system, no infrastructure. And when we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about existing of strong internet, existing of computers, smartphones, skills to utilize all these equipments. Do people have a private place to sit even and learn? And with that, I'm talking about the young people learning, and I'm talking about the educators themselves. Initial research about this issue showed that there's a high deteriorating of quality of education in Palestine, and that this is happening in both school system and university system, both. Although universities were better in doing the shift, still there is a very big gap in education. This education gap, the accessibility and the quality of education also varied if you are a private school or a private university or you are a public school or the public university. The access to the ability for students also to access the education was also varied based on their social class, if they are from villages, refugee camps, or cities. For example, areas of Hebron shown to be the least reaching distance education or online education. Areas like Ramallah, where you see higher level of higher standards of living, like 90% of the population reached and access to distance learning. While you go to areas like Jericho, it was where the Jordan Valley is, it had lower numbers, and it's highly shocking. So this is something to think about. Also, most of schools and universities utilize low-cost systems for delivering classes, such as Google Meet, Zoom, but Zoom without the subscription. And this is where you will have the class cutting off after every 45 minutes because it's a private connection. And WhatsApp. This is based on the feedback provided by students, families, and educators. They show that the levels of the quality of education is much lower and less effective than face-to-face. And these are where the ones who reach the education. Also, Gaza Strip faced another challenge. In Gaza Strip, electricity is there only for 4 hours a day. So both teachers and students couldn't actually follow on in education and online on distance learning. Young males, youth males, and people with special needs also were faced to be the least able to follow on with a distance education. Mainly males, because of the economic crisis, they had to go back to work to join the labor market, even if they are still at high school. People with special needs, the schools didn't have the equipment, the infrastructure to provide them with tools that are adaptable for their needs. And this is main challenge that we can see. And in Palestine, about 50% of the young people couldn't access the online learning process. Additionally, the faculty also, or the educators, not all of them have the tools needed to learn to teach through approaches, interactive approaches through online tools. And with this, you cannot actually shift just overnight the education approach. I would like to share with you a conversation I had 2 days ago with one of my students. Can you please turn your camera on and speak? Sorry, students, I'm utilizing my neighbor's internet. If I turn the camera on, I will not be able to hear you. Okay, can you answer the question we asked about the article? I did not read the article, me asking him. Why? My brother needed to do his homework. We have one device at home, and I am currently using my phone to attend the class. In such a situation, what you can do? This is actually where the crisis is. This is where we shifted into providing basic information for the students, basic information needed for the profession that we are teaching, instead of actually working as we like, as we wish, on critical thinking, on expanding the horizon, on building a different skills and perspective that will allow these young people to be able to transition to the market or to the society and be the active citizens we are asking them to be. So, with regard, in addition to all of that, at this moment we have all teachers at public schools. They are, because they're receiving cuts in their salaries, they decided that they're not gonna do blended teaching. They're sticking to online teaching, though they don't have all the tools and access. But because some of them, they don't even have the money to pay the transport from their villages to schools. And this is a main challenge when we're thinking about the whole system of education and what are we expecting, and the crisis of the young people, what they be facing in, let's say, in another 10 years. And this is where, when we're looking about the impact of the COVID-19, it's not only now, it's what we are predicting for the future, because of what we're having now in schools, in the current economy, and how people actually are exploiting all the resources they have to serve. As for economy and unemployment, as I mentioned, currently we have 38% of the young people are unemployed. 127,000, how do you read this number? 127,000, okay, are working in the informal sector. That means, and where is the informal sector? Either they are working in construction sites, in locations where they don't have benefits, or they are benefits or any rights, or wherever they find jobs. They may go to the labor in the Israeli market, mainly in where they would find it in settlements, in the colonies, in the Israeli colonies, or inside the Israeli, they would cross into the areas occupied by Israel in 1948, as by international law right now, they call it Israel. And they join the Israeli market. For taking into consideration the Israeli lockdown procedures, what happened is that they put restriction on people, on young people joining the market. You're allowed to enter on this day, you're allowed to leave 3 weeks after, which is the duration expected for people to face the COVID. In these times, they are working in informal sectors. They are also not as workers. They don't have permits, and they are living with no sleeping arrangement and being exploited. And most of them are sleeping in the streets. This put them into health hazards. A lot of them actually are exposed to COVID-19 and other type of problems and challenges where they live. And this was one of the main reasons when they return to their communities that they bring back the infection to their neighbors and families. And this was one of the main reasons in areas, for example, like Hebron, to have a high infection and community infection rates, spread of the virus in these communities. These workers, because these young people, because they want to ensure that they can keep working, what will they do is that they avoid the Palestinian Ministry of Health testing points, and they will go around it so they don't get into any quarantine, which increase the health system challenges within the Palestinian society. And currently we're facing a lot of young people, more young people are showing severe cases of COVID-19 than we used to see before. Another thing I want to look at is, and I mentioned the concept of alternative development, and I want to mention on that. So lately, and this is a good point to focus on, although previously all SMEs, small medium enterprises, they showed a lot of challenges, but what we're noticing now is that a lot of the young people are going back to work on projects, on small projects, and in more cooperative models than its individual model, going back to agriculture, where they are utilizing areas C's, where they have land that is where the agriculture land is, and they will work on this land. Most of the time, because this land the regular farmers cannot access, they will give it to the young people for free. So that gives them access to land. And what they're working on is self-employment, at the same time going back to food production that's totally independent. These young people, what we've noticed all during the COVID is that they are utilizing social media and community supported agriculture approach to sell their products, and they are expanding out of their local region. So if they are in Tulkarem, which is the north of the West Bank, you find them actually selling their products in Ramallah or in Bethlehem, and they do it through social media or local NGOs that are in support. And this is a very important development to see taking place. This is actually, if adopted, maybe it's not as easy because of the control of the land and the water needed and all of this, but this can be an alternative that can be presented in the Palestinian context, in which it can provide collective work, building social support networks, provide employment for the young people, and at the same time ensure food sovereignty that is needed for the survival of the communities, and making them less dependent on the colonizer or the international agencies. Okay. I don't think I have a lot of time remaining, but I would like to look at one point that's taking place at this moment. This is a report that was released actually yesterday by that's saying at this moment we have 4,500 prisoners in Israeli prisons. These prisoners, from which lately it's becoming a regular scene for young people to see the Israeli are coming, invading the house or the building, arresting the young people and go back. These young people are staying in prison with no court, under torture, with interrogation. Most of the time, these are either university students or fresh graduates. What are their charges? They are active in the student movement, the Palestinian student movement in their university, or they are socially active. And this is alarming for what's going on. What's happening here is, I found it interesting talking about with some of the released students, and I quote what they tell me. At the prison, there's a whole section for students. It's not the only section. Section can be divided with students affiliated with Palestinian political parties or not. Two aspects are faced by the arrest. Okay, they are arrested because of their participation or suspicion of participation in the student movement. Be released from the prison, the student is saying this, this is a fresh graduate student. What he's saying, there's an economic factor of what impact, if he can be released or not. In this case, the student is the young prisoners. What he's saying, was accused of being socially active. My involvement in community work was not appealing to the Israeli occupation. I was employed. I managed to pay for a lawyer 4,000 USD to defend me. The result was my lawyer did the job he's supposed to do. He attended all military court sessions, negotiated with the court till I was released. I'm still not free. I have to attend the court sessions, but my lawyer will try to pass the time till the duration of is expected for my arrest is over, and then they will not persecute me. In the prison, I met another person who had the same charge. He's in prison since the start of the year. Now it's November and no one knows when he will be out. I was lucky to have the financial resources and stay only for 4 months. This young person is now looking for a job. He lost his job. This is his second time he got arrested, and this is his second job after being arrested. Accordingly, what we see that they are living in a state of uncertainty. They don't know when they are going to be arrested. Their employment will be totally affected. Their financial resources also are affected. And most of all, what we're asking usually young people for inclusion is participation. And this is totally, if they are scared from the experience, would they yield or not? This is a major question, and this is mainly depending on to which extent this young people took the exit, a personal or individualized exit. On the other hand, other prisoners, the 4,500, they do not have a government or a system or an NGO to defend them, and they are in the same status. And this creates a question about where is the person, the individualized versus the collective. And this is something to think about when we're thinking about the engagement of the young Palestinians. I would stop here. I see you, Carles, almost. Yeah? I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Sorry, you have 5 minutes more. 5 more
minutes.
Oh,
I have 5 more minutes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Maybe I will. Okay. Let me then go to the more actions that the young people took. What we noticed from the work with the young people is that the actions they're taking are joining the local community, supporting emergency committees, and taking a very active role in supporting their communities, and that's providing them with status at the local level, which is very important. They are creating alternative development models that are not necessarily fully successful, but they are starting initiatives that can create a potential for a whole society to follow or think about and analyze and invest in, and to see how it can be developed into models of youth and community development approaches. And the third one is that they are working on direct issues that emerge in their community, and that takes away the control of the hegemony system, of either the oppression of the patriarchy or the colonization. For example, one of the initiatives I was following, I'm going to finish in this, is that, for example, they would support the walk to school with young children, younger generation, to ensure that they reach to school, especially young women, young girls. So they ensure the girl education because the school is in an area surrounded by settlements. So with this, they are breaking two structures, the colonization and the social structure. And I will stop over here. And thank you for your patience, and I'm looking forward for any questions. I can't hear you. No. Carles?
Sí, sorry, now you hear me?
Yes.
I have had problems with my AirPods, but now it's better. So we continue. There have been some questions or some comments. ¿Ha habido alguna pregunta o alguna cuestión? They ask, what about religion? Are Palestinian youth in secularization process?
Not all of them. It varies on the young people. In general, we are a highly religious community, and that will include both Muslims and Christians. And we have some also Palestinian Jews. Mostly they are highly religious society, but that doesn't mean that also we don't have secular parties, and the laws that we have are also implemented by the Palestinian authorities and by the Palestinian parties following the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, are mainly secular parties. So, yeah.
Unai Amézaga preguntaba si es activo, pero no.
Yeah, I didn't understand what she mean by the Palestinian Youth Association.
Okay.
This is why I was like, what do you like to know? And she was, is it active? But I didn't know, because I was not talking about a specific. So the examples I gave were from youth initiatives that I was following as a researcher and as a youth worker, but it's not in a specific organization.
Maybe you can explain better some details with which kind of youth organization you are working with.
Okay, so the youth in these initiatives are not following organizations, because a lot of the youth initiatives since 2011 actually were trying to be identified as apolitical, although they would have a perspective about what the Palestinian society vision, or their vision of the Palestinian society, how it should be. But they decided, because they have a highly disappointed with the political parties, that they do not want to be associated with them, especially with the division between Fatah and Hamas. So these youth initiatives, they will be working by themselves. They may coordinate with various youth organizations in their region as a way to access to resources or certain kind of knowledge, or even sometimes to be able to conduct an activity, because maybe sometimes they would need an umbrella or a location or a place to meet. But they try to keep their independence when they work.
There is another question in English comparing Palestine very similar to Mexico. Thank you very much for your presentation, because on the context you have already shown us about Palestine, I could say that in many ways Mexico faced the same educative challenge, but in particular I would like to know if the pandemic motivates early dropouts because of the distancing education, and also what young people think about school in the context of the pandemics.
No, it's not encouraging dropouts to come back to education, and mainly because of the challenges. It's not becoming flexible and really have the tools for the distance learning, and this is what one of the main challenges. On the contrary, I would say we will have more students dropping out if we continue on this way. With regard to what do they think about school in the context of the pandemics, you could feel that students are not really feeling the seriousness of or effectiveness of the online studying. I'll give you an example. You will have students who will put themselves online, and especially that we are using these low-cost applications. So you cannot really tell, and if they don't open their cameras, you will see that the student is there, but they are not necessarily there. So I have a lot of the students, because they don't believe in this effectiveness. I know personally a lot of the students that they will turn themselves on, and they will go and sleep or go to work or go and do everything else. If by chance you call on them, then they would try to respond, and sometimes they would say, no, I didn't hear you, the internet was not the best. So they're not feeling good about it. And a lot of the students, they will tell you, I prefer to go face-to-face, and especially if we're talking about exams. This is becoming a very big challenge for education.
There is another question. ¿Alguna otra pregunta? If not, I think it's the time for the end of your speech. I think it has been a very good end of our conference. We start in the antipode in Australia, we finish in Palestine. It's a travel across the world. The pandemic, of course, is a global phenomenon, but in each country, in each city, in each region, it is experienced differently by young people, depending on the political, economical, and social conditions. Thank you very much, Abeer. It has been a pleasure to have you in our conference. And at the end, the Mediterranean is our common land, and we have a lot of things in common. Por si a alguien le interesa, dentro de un año o dos, seguramente Abeer visitará nuestra universidad en un programa Erasmus, y por tanto, si alguien tiene interés en invitarla a su universidad y a su centro, tendrá ocasión de compartir aquí sus experiencias. Esperemos que dentro de un año la pandemia ya sea agua del pasado. En todo caso, ya sin solución de continuidad, vamos a proceder a la clausura de estas terceras jornadas de investigaciones sobre juventud y sociedad. Y para no extenderme, hay todavía 43 personas conectadas, lo que un viernes por la tarde es todo un éxito. Creo que estamos muy contentos los organizadores por la asistencia y sobre todo por la participación en los 2 días de sesiones. Confieso que es mi primera conferencia totalmente virtual. Hasta ahora había asistido a alguna sesión, alguna conferencia, pero no 2 días seguidos de congreso virtual, que por una parte cansa, ciertamente, pero por otra parte es una posibilidad de seguir un debate, en este caso, de un tema que nos afecta a todos. Y ya como clausura voy a ceder la palabra a Almudena Moreno, presidenta del Comité de Investigación 37 de la Federación Española de Sociología, para que ella os dirija unas palabras. Almudena, por favor.
Sí, voy. Buenas tardes, ¿me oís? Sí, buenas tardes. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting and very expressive about the situation of young Palestine, and we are very happy to hear you. Thank you very much. I translate to Spanish. I'm going to Spanish. Bueno, pues ponemos fin a las jornadas. Yo creo que han sido muy positivas. Me pasa como a Carles, que era la primera vez que iba a seguir unas jornadas online, telemáticas. Y bueno, pues mi valoración es muy positiva. Creo que ha habido debates muy interesantes, que ha habido... han salido temas realmente interesantes que abren nuevas líneas de investigación, nuevas líneas de reflexión. Está todo lo hemos apuntado todo, está todo recogido y mi valoración no puede ser otra que muy positiva. Agradecer a todos los que habéis estado ahí, hora tras hora, día tras día, los 2 días intensamente. Y bueno, pues mis felicitaciones a todos por vuestra participación, por vuestras contribuciones y por la participación tan estimulante que hemos tenido estos 2 días. Muchas gracias a todos.
Sí, alguien comenta que han faltado las cervezas y los cafés. Efectivamente,
Ya.
las pausas café es lo que se encuentra a faltar, pero esperamos compensarlo en el futuro. Abeer también debe entendernos porque la cultura mediterránea, sin el contacto personal y físico, algo falta. A continuación doy la palabra a Cristina López, que representará al Centro Reina Sofía de Adolescencia y Juventud. Adelante, Cristina.
Muchas gracias, Carles. Muchas gracias, Abeer. Gracias por estar esta tarde con nosotros y nosotras. Empezábamos ayer las jornadas con la lectura del manifiesto de la Juventud ante la pandemia. También nos contaba Carles ayer que este manifiesto lo lanzamos también a los medios de comunicación para que se pudieran hacer eco en la medida de las posibilidades de la actualidad informativa. Hemos conseguido algunas respuestas, han estado en las 3 radios nacionales, en la SER, en COPE, en Onda Cero, también en emisoras locales, en algunos periódicos locales también, lo ha dado la agencia Servimedia. Y bueno, estamos muy contentas y muy contentos de esta repercusión, ¿no? Y aspiramos a más, vamos a intentar seguirlo moviendo. De hecho, lo hemos subido a la plataforma change.org para que se convierta en viral, para que llegue lo más lejos posible y poder tener poder convertir esa vocación que tenemos de transferencia del conocimiento, tanto en políticas como en programas, como en ideas para el desarrollo de la juventud, y creemos que esta es una buena vía, ¿no?, de participación virtual, que ahora es el terreno en el que nos movemos. Gracias otra vez a todas y a todos por participar y nos veremos como tarda en 2 años.
Muy bien. Y ahora daría también la palabra a Jorge Benedicto para que intente hacer no un resumen, que es imposible, pero un balance. Él ha estado presente en las 3 jornadas, en las 2 jornadas anteriores. Jorge, si puedes hacer un balance de cómo ha ido el contenido de las jornadas.
Bueno, mi opinión, well, Abeer, thank you very much by the conference. Y en relación a las conclusiones, yo creo que es bastante difícil extraer alguna conclusión porque esto habla muy bien de la riqueza de las jornadas, es decir, han sido muy variadas, ha habido muchísima presencia de comunicaciones, de trabajos, de investigaciones, muy interesantes. Yo muy rápido, porque no quiero ser el pesado de la reunión, quería subrayar 3 cosas que me parecen importantes que han ido saliendo a lo largo de estos 2 días. Cuando hablamos de jóvenes y pandemias y sus consecuencias, yo creo que una de las ideas que a mí me ha quedado bastante claro y que empezábamos nuestras jornadas en la conferencia de Hernán Cuervo diciéndolo, y luego ha ido apareciendo en varias de las sesiones, por ejemplo, esta tarde se lo he oído también a Pablo Gonmaro en un vídeo que nos ponía, es como la pandemia en realidad no nos ha descubierto casi nada, sino que lo que ha hecho es sacar a la luz los problemas, las vulnerabilidades, el propio deterioro de la posición social. Yo ahora cuando oía a nuestra colega palestina pensaba, digo, bueno, pero es que tampoco es que la pandemia haya cambiado radicalmente la situación de la juventud palestina, sino que puede ser que haya sacado a la luz algunos elementos que no visibilizábamos todos los días, pero la difícil posición social de los jóvenes palestinos estaba ya antes. Bueno, pues eso en un terreno completamente distinto, pero también pasa en las sociedades europeas y en las latinoamericanas. Es decir, la pandemia lo que está ayudando, si podemos decir como efecto positivo, si se puede hablar así, es sacar a la luz los problemas, las vulnerabilidades, el deterioro, un poco la reflexión sobre cuál es la posición social que ocupan los jóvenes en nuestra sociedad. Y eso, además, me parece que es un gran acierto del manifiesto al que antes se refería Cristina. La segunda conclusión que yo creo que se deduce de estas jornadas es que las consecuencias de la pandemia en las personas jóvenes son multidimensionales. Es decir, por muy importantes que sean los aspectos estructurales, que todos los hemos mencionado, la educación, el tema de educación, el tema de trabajo, el tema de vivienda, yo creo que no nos podemos quedar ahí. Es decir, también hay aspectos subjetivos, aspectos relacionales. Y esto de alguna manera, nos supone un reto para los investigadores en juventud, porque tenemos que seguir investigando cómo a partir de ahora se despliegan las biografías juveniles. Y en ese sentido yo recogería una idea que Rafa Merino nos ha repetido ya varias veces, que es la necesidad de hacer investigación longitudinal. Es decir, estaría muy bien seguir a los jóvenes de a esta generación, podríamos llamarles, no sé si, no es muy exacto, pero podríamos llamarles esta generación de la pandemia, ir siguiendo cómo construyen sus biografías. Y la última de las conclusiones es la variedad de investigaciones que se han hecho, que a mí me ha sorprendido muchísimo, sobre jóvenes y pandemias. Hemos oído en estos 2 días cosas muy interesantes, muy variadas y que denotan además un poco la calidad de la imaginación sociológica que se ha puesto en funcionamiento en esta crisis. Ahora bien, yo creo que hay que pasar a una nueva fase, a una fase de consolidación. Es decir, no nos podemos quedar solamente en unas conclusiones muy provisionales sobre lo que les ha pasado a los jóvenes al confinamiento, sino que tenemos que consolidar todos esos hallazgos y seguir haciendo una investigación en profundidad precisamente de cuáles son las consecuencias que esto va a tener y tiene en las vidas, en las biografías, en los proyectos vitales y en el propio concepción de futuro de los jóvenes. Y estas son, desde mi punto de vista, las consecuencias fundamentales. Yo solamente quiero agradecer a todo el mundo que ha participado en las comunicaciones, porque yo creo que se ha demostrado que el espacio de los estudios de juventud va en aumento y se va consolidando, y yo creo que solamente nos queda un reto que en esta situación ha quedado muy claro, y es la necesidad de incrementar nuestra repercusión en la sociedad. Es decir, parece mentira que todos nosotros estemos hablando de los jóvenes, de sus capacidades, de tal, y luego, cuanto que nos vamos a los medios, cuanto que nos vamos fuera de nuestro ámbito académico, lo que predomina es la visión uniformizadora, una visión muy simplista, una visión estigmatizadora, etc. Bueno, pues esto yo pondría casi como el reto para las próximas jornadas, que es aumentar nuestra repercusión social y que no nos quedemos encerrados en el ámbito académico. Y por lo demás, pues muchas gracias a todos y que tengáis buen fin de semana después de estos 2 días de trabajo.
Por último, voy a ceder la palabra a 2 personas sin las cuales estas jornadas no se hubieran podido hacer, que son Ariadna Santos y Eduard Ballester, que han sido los coordinadores técnicos de las jornadas. A menudo nos quejamos de que hablamos de los jóvenes, los adultos, pero dejamos a los jóvenes un poco en segundo término. Creo que estas jornadas no ha sido así. Ha habido muchísimos investigadores jóvenes que han aportado cosas muy interesantes y ha habido un intercambio generacional muy interesante. Pero Ariadna y Eduard han sido especialmente activos y les doy la palabra para que de algún modo clausuren las jornadas.
Bueno, Ari, si quieres empiezo yo, pero muy breve, porque yo creo que... ¿Me escucha bien?
Sí, sí.
Ah, vale. Yo creo que estamos todos un poco cansados de tener pantallas abiertas aquí para ir saltando de una sala a otra, pero yo quería hacer como un poco, bueno, cuando empezamos a plantearnos estas jornadas, ¿no? Después de las de Fuenlabrada, que seguro que muchos de los que estamos por aquí participamos, ¿no? pues bueno, las planteamos primero presencialmente, luego mantuvimos mucho tiempo una semipresencialidad, ¿no? Me acuerdo que hasta hace poco esa era la idea y finalmente totalmente virtual. Y bueno, para nosotros ha supuesto un reto, yo creo, porque no sabíamos muy bien cómo gestionarlo, cómo hacerlo y si saldría todo bien. Y yo creo que nos deberíamos, ¿no?, como agradecer entre todos o felicitarnos porque más allá de la asistencia, que ha habido mucha, yo creo ya desde las inscripciones que fueron 200, ¿no? Pero en cada sesión, Carles lo contaba un día, ¿no? Había entre 90 personas, luego 90, 80, 60, en las que estaban simultáneas unas 20, 25 personas en todas. Entonces, yo creo que en ese sentido ha sido un éxito y más allá de esto, la participación que ha generado todas las mesas, ¿no? Al menos las que yo he estado, que no han podido ser todas, siempre ha habido un buen debate y todo. Y por último, me parece que casi sin quererlo, pero queriéndolo, hemos situado las jornadas en medio de un momento, más allá de la crisis del coronavirus y todo, ¿no?, donde la juventud, bueno, pues tendrá un papel aquí que habrá que ver cuál papel toma dentro de toda la crisis que puede venir, la crisis que está sucediendo y no solo esto, ¿no?, sino como lo hablábamos en el manifiesto y más cosas, ¿no?, por la estigmatización que recae sobre ellos y todo. Entonces, me parece que se han situado las jornadas en el momento casi perfecto, ¿no? Y esperemos que podamos repetir próximamente el año que viene, si se puede, y sigamos con estos debates interesantes y todas las presentaciones que han sido, yo creo que muy buenas. Ari, si quieres.
Bueno, yo nada, yo solo agradecer a todas y todos vuestras contribuciones, también agradecer la oportunidad de poder coordinar estas jornadas. Tengo que decir que ha sido todo un reto porque me he incorporado justo este año y bueno, además el contexto de pandemia mundial pues ha significado como un añadido, ¿no?, a este reto. Pero a la vez también ha sido como muy gratificante ahora ver el resultado de todas las jornadas, de todas las sesiones que hemos ido pasando estos 2 últimos días. También como joven me gustaría recalcar también que la participación de personas jóvenes en esta jornada ha sido algo a recalcar, ¿no? Es un tema que desde la organización también nos planteábamos, como ha dicho Carlos antes, añadir estas voces de personas jóvenes y creo que aquí también lo hemos conseguido, ¿no? Hemos tenido presentaciones de TFGs, de TFMs, de proyectos de tesis. Y, perdón, mi gato está por aquí y me reclama, pero bueno, esto también hemos contado ayer contamos con 2 personas jóvenes en la mesa de debate final, la directora general de INJUVE, la presidenta del Consejo de la Juventud de España. También nos han seguido por redes estudiantes de máster de Juventud y también en la organización estamos Eduard y yo, ¿no? Esto también es, bueno, estoy segura que escuchando todas nuestras voces y dando este espacio, ¿no?, nos hará, como mínimo creo que nos hará avanzar en el desarrollo de este contrato intergeneracional que se ha mencionado varias veces en el Congreso y esperemos que el contexto que nos deja la pandemia no nos lo complique más. Muchas gracias a todos y todas.
Bien, en efecto, en redes ha funcionado muy bien las jornadas. Os invito a ir a Twitter y buscar el hashtag Jornadas REJS. Ha habido muchos comentarios y muchos retweets y os animo a firmar el manifiesto que os hemos puesto en el chat, el link al manifiesto en change.org. También hay un link a una promoción de la Biblioteca de Infancia y Juventud de los últimos títulos de la colección y vinculado a estos os anuncio que la intención es que podamos publicar una selección de las ponencias centrales y de algunas de las comunicaciones presentadas en las jornadas que ojalá podamos hacer un libro con las mejores al respecto y ya os mantendremos informados. Y por último, para acabar con buen sabor de boca, proponíamos acabar con el rap del coronavirus, que lo hemos encontrado que lo promovió un grupo de jóvenes de un ayuntamiento, creo que de Alicante. No sé, Ariadna, si lo hemos puesto en el chat. No sé si es mejor que cada uno conecte el YouTube del rap del coronavirus o lo hacemos todos al mismo tiempo, Ariadna y Eduard. ¿Me ayudáis? Porque yo he pagado la novetada porque demuestra que mi aire pues, se ha agotado justamente en el momento de la clausura. Después de 2 días de escuchar las ponencias, obviamente las pilas ya no daban más de sí. Por tanto, ponemos el rap, Ariadna.
Sí, ahora lo puedo compartir.
Por si algunos se lo preguntaban. No, si te lo preguntas no es mentira. El virus se encuentra a la vuelta de la esquina, recorre plazas, parques, calles y avenidas. Está a ambos lados, abajo y arriba, y es que mata igual el virus que el que no sigue las medidas. Y aún así hay gente que toma la iniciativa, se manifiestan y juntan su saliva. ¿Qué más da, no? Si son solo casi 1 millón de vidas y las que vendrán, porque no le afecta a los chiquillos hasta que llega la desgracia y la culpa para los chinos. La gente no empatiza con los que familiares han perdido, si no les toca de cerca les da igual quien se haya ido. Igualmente hay que mantener la calma por los barrios, la mortalidad no es muy alta por suerte, eso está claro. Si tenemos que estar separados pues lo estamos, se lo merecen los padecidos, los fallecidos y los sanitarios. Un respeto para ellos, al igual que el saludo, trabajar codo con codo velando por el futuro. Se vienen curvas y la curva ahora es ascendente. Hacedle caso a Simón que esto no va de presidentes, así que por favor, gélidos metros a rajatabla, que hay que dar la cara pero medio tapada. Las ideologías ahora mismo no sirven de nada, esto es el virus contra la raza humana. Si no te ha tocado a ti, piensa que a alguien sí. Alguien ha perdido un ser querido. A nadie le gusta esta situación. Por eso debemos pararla.
Bueno, y ahora sí, con este buen sabor de boca, nos despedimos hasta las 4º jornadas, como ha dicho Jorge. Esperamos que en un tiempo podamos hacer las 4º jornadas de investigación en Juventud y Sociedad. En este caso ya presencialmente nos podremos abrazar, saludar y hacer los cafés y los post-sesiones que todos necesitamos. Yo diría que ahora podemos aplaudir cada uno desde nuestra casa a todo el mundo, los que han participado, y en fin, hasta la próxima. Lástima que podamos ver aquí en todas las caras y en directo, pero seguro que las imaginamos. Bueno, y un agradecimiento especial a Abeer por la conferencia y a Hernán Cuervo por la conferencia inaugural. Tanto a Hernán como la directora del INJUVE y la presidenta del Consejo de la Juventud nos han escrito correos muy contentas y contentos de haber participado, muy entusiasmados por la reacción. Bueno, chao a todos y hasta la próxima.